Whether or not you're taking an organised language course, self-study is a very important part of your English journey. Today we're joined by our good friend and colleague Anna Wright, who has some great advice on learner diaries and other ways to organise your studies and take your English to the next level. Welcome to
Aprender Inglés with Reza and Craig.
If you are a new listener to the show, you're very welcome. My name's Craig.
And my name's Reza.
And we're very lucky today to have a special guest, Anna, who's joining us on the show. Hi, Anna.
Hi Craig.
How long have you been teaching?
I've been teaching since about 1992. I think it's quite a long time.
So we usually say, like, between Reza and I, we've got 45 years of experience together. So how many years experience are we giving to the audience this week?
That's quite a lot.
A lot, yeah.
More than enough. So before we get into the main part of the podcast with Anna, we're going to listen to some feedback we've got from Vicente from La Morada, Alicante.
Good evening, Reza and Craig. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Vicente, and I come from La Morada, a little village in Alicante province, in the border with the Murcia community, a land that, excepting yours, is the best in the world. I became a fan of La Mansión del Inglés and your podcasts recently. You are doing a great job, and I'm earning a lot of new vocabulary, constructing sentences in the right way and trying to use the verbs in their suitable time. It's my first time using the SpeakPipe, and it seems to me it won't be the last. I hear the old podcast every day. All of them are very useful in my daily life. And as the Spanish refranero says, knowledge doesn't take place. In this case, the tools, tips, and advices you give to all of us listeners. Expecting to your new podcast, thanks a lot for your time, your attitude, your compromise to teach English in this modern and pleasant way. It's a pleasure to hear from you and the new matters of each episode. Best regards from La Morada, my best wish.
Thank you very much, Vicente, for your voice message. Any comments on what Vicente said?
Well, thanks very much, Vicente, for your first time. Wow, that was brilliant. Well done. We could understand everything you said.
Yeah, it was really clear.
Unfortunately, we missed just the end of your message because remember on the SpeakPipe messaging service, you only have 90 seconds. So when you send your voice message, be aware that it's going to cut out and stop after 90 seconds. Is there any way we can help Vicente improve his English?
Well, I just noticed a couple of things he said that I wanted to pick up on. I think you said in the border, that he lived in the border of, was it Alicante and Valencia province? But we usually say on the border. Mm-hmm. The preposition on.
And advice, isn't it? I think you said advices, but actually in English it's advice. It's uncountable. But again, that's difficult as well. Lots of people make that mistake.
Yep, and he also said verb time. I think he meant verb tense, the tense of the verb, because in Spanish it's tiempo, which could be time, but it could be tense. So we speak about verb tenses.
And is it my imagination, Vicente, or did you say the Spanish word refreneo or something like that?
It's a refrain, isn't it?
Refrain. Yeah. Or saying, maybe, a saying.
Yeah, it could be.
Saying.
And another thing, Vicente, you said accepting. I think you meant to say apart from yours. Aparte de. So apart from yours is the best in the world. And yes, we agree with you. One last thing, Vicente, you said at the end, expecting to your new podcast. It's better to say I'm waiting for your new podcast, or maybe I'm looking forward to. That lovely expression, looking forward to, that you can use when you write emails. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Just remember it's the gerund after the to if you use a verb.
Oh, yes. And Vicente, just one comment, which is nothing to do with English or what you said or anything maybe, but you've proved me wrong. I keep telling everybody, all Vicentes come from Valencia. Not you. You're from Alicante. You're a Vicente from Alicante.
I've never thought of that before, but you're right. There are a lot of Vicentes here in Valencia.
We've got so many Vicentes
Yeah, it's
listening
true.
from
It's
Valencia.
true.
It's
Yeah.
incredible. So hello to all you Vicentes out there. So this week we're speaking about self-study tips. Any advice or anything you can do to help you improve your English if you're studying by yourself? Maybe you can't afford to pay for a formal language course and you're using this podcast to improve your English. So we have a list of 8 things that you could possibly use to study by yourself to improve your English. And they are: number 1, learner diaries; number 2, vocabulary notebooks; number 3, songs and videos; 4, speaking online to practice your speaking; 5, mobile apps if you use your phone; number 6, books; and number 7, podcasts, of course, like this one; and number 8, online forums. So let's begin with the first one, learner diaries. And I know, Anna, that you've used these in the past. Can you explain what a learner diary is and how the listeners can use them to improve their English?
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite passionate about learner diaries, but I think what they are really writing what you did every day. And that could just be literally what you did every day, or it could be things that you learnt so that you're able to record your vocabulary, or maybe websites you used, or maybe you're writing your objectives of what you want to do. Or even if you don't like writing, you can make it a picture diary and you can add little comments. I don't know if you guys have ever used them before, but I think they're really useful.
I've written a diary. I have used a diary for noting like experiences, holidays, things that I've learned, but not for learning a language. So is this something that you do by yourself or maybe together with a teacher?
I think at first sometimes it can be useful to have a teacher to start you off, but I mean, really, it can be just a question of getting your notebook and starting writing. You don't actually need to have a teacher, but sometimes it helps at first. And when I've used it, it has been me that started it off with my students, and then little by little taken away the kind of sort of influence that I've had, because a diary, after all, is something that's very personal. Mm-hmm. And I don't think you should dictate how your students keep it, because actually, it has to be memorable for them. Mm-hmm. So, you can start by encouraging them to write questions. If they are with a teacher, then they can write questions to the teacher and then you can reply to them. And then the teacher can give feedback as well. But It doesn't have to have a teacher.
So if the student listening to this is studying English and they don't have a teacher, what kind of things would they write down in the diary? Obviously, they could write vocabulary.
Yeah.
And they could draw pictures to illustrate expressions and vocabulary, etc. What other sort of things would they include?
Well, it depends, really. I mean, they could write down resources they've used. They could write down websites. They could write down apps they're using. Or they could simply write, if they're practicing the past tense, you can practice different tenses. You can say, okay, in this particular entry, you're going to practice what you did last weekend. Or you could be writing about plans and you're practicing the future. I mean, it's really up to you. You could be writing stories. You can make it whatever you want to make it.
Sounds really good. Sounds really useful.
One thing I really like about them is that it's sometimes hard for a student to perceive and really feel the benefits of their progress. But with a learner diary, if they keep it quite up to date, it's something tangible, something that they can actually hold and see.
What does tangible mean?
Tangible, that you can touch it, you can feel it. It's not just an abstract thing, that they can really see their progress.
That's right.
It gives a lot of motivation.
And actually, when they look back, if they start to look back at the first entry compared to the second or the third, or even later on, they can really see the progress they're making, because maybe the entries get longer. Maybe, they're seeing what vocabulary they've learned. Because if you don't keep a record of vocabulary anyway, then you're going to forget it. You need to keep revisiting it. And so there you have a record if you have a diary.
Mm-hmm. I did something similar when I was trying to lose weight. I wrote down my weight and everything I had to eat on a particular day. And then I looked back like in 4 or 5 months' time and realised I was eating more now than I was when I started.
Oh, no. Oh, yes. Yeah, that can be a bit depressing.
But perhaps not the same thing. You can definitely see your progress if you're learning a language.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so.
And it's something that I think it has lots of benefits. Like, it can help students focus on specific objectives.
Yes.
No, or things that they can achieve, achievable objectives.
Well, we've spoken about goals in the past, haven't we? With SMART goals, making them realistic, making them time sensitive. So you could put that in your diary and then give yourself a date, make sure it's achievable, and then work towards it.
Yeah, because if you're having problems with the past tense and you're just doing grammatical exercise, it's really boring. Whereas if you're actually pushing yourself to, say, do 6 entries that are talking about what you did, then I think it's much more interesting, much more personal as well.
Yeah.
And if you create the habit of doing it on a daily basis or even weekly basis, then that routine gets you studying and gets you connected to English on a regular basis.
Because it only needs to be really 5 or 10 minutes a day, because I think sometimes students have a bit of a block about writing as well. And it doesn't actually, if you don't like writing, you could also do some sort of audio diary as well. It doesn't have to be a written formed thing. It could be something you're recording as well.
How would that work?
Well, you could use your mobile phone to do that. You could use like some sort of, I don't know, something like Audio Boom or Linked. You can set up a free account and then you're just recording and then you listen back. And that can really help your pronunciation as well.
Of course, links to all these services that Anna's speaking about can be found on the webpage at inglespodcast.com/186. So you mentioned Linked and Audio Boom. What about WhatsApp? Because we have mentioned services in the past that use WhatsApp to communicate with the teacher. Why not, instead of typing your message in text to your friends, why not record your message in English and send it to a friend who speaks English?
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
Yeah, it's quicker too. Yeah. Quicker than typing.
Really
so you're practicing your speaking, you're practicing your listening.
Yeah.
If your friend doesn't understand you, you know you have to record it again, improving your pronunciation to make sure the message gets across, make sure it's understood. That could be a very useful and free way of practicing your listening and speaking.
Absolutely, yeah.
Those were very good positive aspects that we've been talking about, but don't you think there are perhaps a few drawbacks to learner diaries? First of all, just not everybody could be bothered. Not everybody wants to keep a diary. You can't really force someone if they don't want to.
If you don't want to do exercise, you mean, then you're not going to do it.
Yeah, you're not.
But you could start something very, very small, couldn't you? Because it doesn't have to be too long. I think everybody can find about 5 minutes a day to do something, don't you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. But I just think some people are going to they're going to need a lot of persuasion.
Yeah, that is definitely one thing. Because, I mean, you can't force someone to do something. And that's happened with me when I've used these diaries with students. Some students absolutely love it. But for some people, it's just really not their thing, you know?
But I think you're right. It definitely seems to be the question of whether it's in your personality to do this kind of thing, whether you're the kind of person who likes to decorate a diary, to write in it, to draw pictures, to create something, and also forming the habit. I think it's important to make sure that you set yourself the goal of even 5 minutes a day writing something, and then make sure after you brush your teeth, the next thing you do is write in your diary, and that happens every day.
Do you do it after you brush your teeth?
For example, there's some psychology that if you connect a new habit that's good that you want to develop to an established habit that you already do, then that connection helps you to do it every day.
Yeah.
If you decide every day after I brush my teeth, immediately, that's when I sit down for 5 minutes and write in English what my goals are for this week, for example, then you create that good habit and it becomes part of your daily routine.
Yeah, because lists are always good anyway. You know, when you've got things to do and you keep a list and you cross them off, then that means you do them. And so if you use a diary also like that, I think that's also a very productive way to get things done.
Yeah.
So with learner diaries, we've been speaking up to now, I think, about analog diaries, taking a notebook and actually writing with pens on paper. What about digital versions of the same thing?
I've experimented a bit with that, and in my experience, and maybe that's just because I'm a bit old-fashioned, I think a notebook is still easier, because I think we're online so much these days, and I think that adding another thing where you're online again, but maybe that's just me. I mean, I think it's easier on paper and more interesting to keep, but I think I may be a bit old-fashioned, really. I don't know. What do you think, Reza?
No, you're preaching to the converted. I totally agree with you.
What does that mean, preaching to the converted?
That she doesn't have to convince me because I already agree with everything you say. very strongly. I'm very much in favour.
You can also
of
say
paper.
preaching to the choir, can't you?
Preaching to the choir.
Preaching to the choir. Oh, yeah. I don't know. I tried once. You mentioned dieting, and I had like an online diet diary, and I just kept forgetting to update it. It was just another thing to do, and I found it really annoying that I had to go online to do this, and I forgot, and then I had to remember what I'd said, and it just wasn't accurate at all. Whereas if you scribble something down, for me, it's just quicker.
So speaking about scribbling down and writing down things on paper, what about point number 2, vocabulary notebooks? We've mentioned this in the past on the podcast. Again, so many apps and digital resources for recording vocabulary on your phone. Any opinions on that? Analog versus digital? Which do you recommend to your students?
I tend to. I've had students who've tried with Anki and Quizlet, and in fact, they tend to say that Anki is the best one because it has a kind of testing tool, so it remembers as well what you've forgotten, and then it retests you. And they seem to really like that idea. Quizlet, I think, doesn't have that tool on it, so they always seem to say that Anki is the best one. And that's what they've been using. But then there are students, again, who just say, I haven't got time for that. Again, they haven't got time. And so then I always say to them, well, if you want, just set up a box system and have one box words that I don't know, the other one words that I do know, and then you can transfer the vocabulary into one of the 2 boxes.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Write it on cards or pieces of paper.
Yeah. I mean, that's really a very basic method, but I think it works. Mm-hmm. Or having just a box where you put your words into is another way to do that too. We've
spoken in the past, Reza, about putting post-it notes around the house, labelling things in English to learn household. I
had a really strange student. Well, he wasn't strange, but his method was a bit weird that I hadn't heard of before. Was he used to put vocabulary into his pocket on little strips of paper, and then he used to transfer them from one pocket to the next when he knew them. That was quite a weird method. But he said that he used to do it every day because he was quite a low level, and it was true that his vocabulary level increased quite quickly, but his pockets were constantly stuffed with paper.
So he'd take out a piece of paper, look at the word, and then what was it, in Spanish on one side and English on the other?
Well, this was actually in the Czech Republic, so it was in Czech on one side, English on the other. And when he knew it, then he transferred it to the other pocket. And then ultimately he transferred it to a box, but it was like a very kind of strange, but...
Wow. I like that because your pockets are always with you.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Yeah.
Wow, yeah. A lot of people just couldn't be bothered to do that. They wouldn't make the effort, but I'd say it would work all right.
You'd have to have pretty big pockets.
Yeah, true.
Depending on your level. If you were advanced, you'd be out here.
Yeah, I know. It was an interesting one anyway. Yeah.
I'm not so familiar with Anki. It sounds really good though. I like the idea of it generating tests. Quizlet I've heard of, but I'm still very much in favour of writing on paper.
Yeah, me too.
You know, Craig, I mean, this is kind of a hobby horse of mine. That means an obsession that I've read quite a bit of research about how writing by hand really reinforces information retention long term.
Yeah.
The effort of doing it does.
Yeah.
There's some special connection that makes you really remember better.
And if you've set it up yourself as well, because I've had students that have shared their Quizlet or their Anki vocabulary to their fellow students, and I don't think it's as memorable for them because they didn't set it up in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
You know
no, I agree with both of you, but I think we have to be aware that these days students have their mobile phones on them 24/7, which means all the time. And they are constantly using and interacting with their mobile phone. If there's an app on their mobile phone, then chances are, if they're waiting in a queue, if they're on the bus, if they've got some dead time, that they'll open it and use it. So although writing on paper, we might agree is more effective, they might not necessarily do it because they don't carry around a notebook with them.
And that's the advantage of these apps, I think. Yeah. Actually, I've got another student who just uses word reference, and he says that it flags up all the new vocabulary that he's looked at, and then he can see what he's looked at, and then he reviews it on word reference. So that's another way of doing it, which I hadn't thought about.
That's very good. Yeah, because we've mentioned word reference as a go-to online dictionary before.
Yeah.
We obviously recommend you group your vocabulary by topic, and I would suggest you choose words you like. You don't necessarily have to put long lists of vocabulary that maybe you feel a bit stressed about learning, but just perhaps choose particular words that you like the sound of, that you have seen many times and that you know you want to include in your vocabulary.
Yeah, make it visual as well. Make it interesting.
Yeah. Another thing you could do, it's a bit more effort, but you could divide your vocabulary notebook into parts of speech or categories.
Yeah.
Like verbs, nouns, or phrasal verbs, or collocations, or things like that. It's a bit more effort, but it might pay off in the long term.
That's true as well. Yeah.
So let's move on to point 3, songs and videos. Obviously, quite a lot of fun. Now, karaoke, we've suggested in the past you actually physically go to a karaoke bar and sing in English, but you might be a bit shy. Remember, you can also do that on YouTube. There are karaoke songs that flash up the lyrics for you and they just give you the music. So a well-known song in English, go to YouTube, search for the name of the song plus the word lyrics, Lyrics, and then sing along to the lyrics and try to follow the tune, follow the music.
Yeah, or YouTube or whatever. You've got everything there. And I always think that people who are interested in music tend to be the best language learners. I don't know whether you found that.
I think it helps.
A lot of my students will say, no, I love listening to music. Mm-hmm. And I think, that it makes a big difference to them.
I admit I often sing at home to myself. Sometimes in English, just a song I like, but I've done it in Spanish as well to kind of practice my Spanish, get the lyrics up on YouTube and just sing to myself. You don't have to go to a karaoke bar.
I prefer doing it in the car.
Yeah.
If I'm alone in the car and there's a song I like,
me too. Yeah,
and I know the lyrics, I'll sing really loud.
Yeah. And also it can correct those like silly mistakes you've got, like people is, people are, and then you get a song that's like people are people. Then you're not going to make that mistake because you're singing it. You're singing the song.
Yep.
What's that song? People are people? Do you know what I mean? If you look on YouTube, you'll find it.
Yeah.
People are people. Okay.
Another thing people can do, you can do on your own. I've done it with Spanish, but in English it's even easier. Get a song you really like, print out the lyrics, and then just make your own closed passage. Just take away a few words, blank out a few. Make
some gaps in the text.
So take out every other line, every alternate line, take it away and see if you can. Yeah. You don't need a teacher to do that. You can do it.
You do
it for yourself.
Yeah, it's fun.
Then, of course, on YouTube, you can find TED Talks, or you can go to the webpage to listen to a TED Talk on tedtalk.com, I think it is.
Yeah. And also there's if you want to, while you're on the metro or whatever, you can download the app TuneIn Radio, and then you can listen to radio in English. So that's songs, or it could be something else. But there's also Radio Garden. Have you heard of that?
No, I haven't.
You twist the dial and it takes you to any country in the world.
Wow.
Where you can listen to their radio station.
Oh, wow.
It's really fun. So like for exams, if you're studying for an exam, there's lots of different accents. So you could go to Scotland, you could go to Ireland, you can move around, you go to Australia, and you get the DJ speaking in that whatever accent they have, which I think is really fun as well.
Brilliant idea.
Yeah. I think
and
so.
of course, you can listen to this podcast on TuneIn Radio. Go to the podcast section. And we're on Spotify as well now. So if you do use Spotify for music to practice your English with lyrics on Spotify, you can listen to this podcast in the same place. Speaking online, number 4.
Yeah.
How can students do that? How can our listeners speak online?
Well, they could get a teacher. You may have heard us mention italki before. you could use italki.
Yeah,
you could.
Yeah,
and on that, I think you don't have to actually pay a teacher. You can set up an intercambio on that. You find people learning all sorts of languages, and they're looking for somebody just to practice with, either writing or speaking. It could lead to something else as well. You never know.
So italki's one website. You could also go to Tandem or Hello Talk, and you can find links to these places on the website at inglespodcast.com/186. Mobile apps. We mentioned before Anki and Quizlet. There's also Memrise that I'm a big fan of. That also has an algorithm, as Anna mentioned before, that shows you vocabulary less frequently once you've learned it. So it keeps repeating the words you're having problems with. And then as you learn a word, you don't see it so often. So I definitely recommend Memrise. And Duolingo is free. Another use for
I
that
love
for your phone.
Duolingo.
Do you use it?
I use it for my Spanish. Yeah, I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun as well. Have you used it, Reza?
A couple of years ago, I used it. Yeah, I haven't used it recently. Yeah, but it was very helpful.
I think it's good
great.
in
Vocabulary.
combination with other things. So, for example, if you studied on Duolingo on your phone, and then once a week you had an intercambio, an exchange with an English speaker on the internet, then those two combined would be a good way of studying for free.
I found Duolingo really good for correcting spelling and things like that, because you're typing all the time and that picks up spelling mistakes. And my students actually have a lot of problems with spelling mistakes.
Mm-hmm. There's Busuu, BUSW, that comes well recommended. And the British Council have an app that's called Learn English Grammar, because that specifically focuses on grammar. So that could be useful for some students as well.
And there's also IELTS Word Power, which is really good too. I know it's geared towards IELTS, but it's another good way to build your vocabulary.
What does
as well.
geared towards mean?
Geared towards, it means that its main purpose is for the IELTS exam. It's directed at the vocabulary, useful for that, for graphs and things like that, but also for essays. But I still think it's a very useful app as well.
Yeah, I think anybody can use it.
Yeah.
I see it as good for any student. It doesn't have to be for IELTS. I've got that myself on my phone.
Oh, have you? Yeah.
Well, just to remind me how it works, kind of thing. Because
Yeah.
I suggest it to students sometimes.
Yeah.
And I think it could be used by anybody in any class.
Yeah, like with anything, it's true.
So if you have a favorite app that you're using, please tell us so that we can then share it on a future podcast with everyone who's listening. And we'll give you the contact details at the end of the podcast. Point number 6, books and blogs.
Yeah, I think the best students that I've ever had have been like voracious readers, bookworms, don't you think? And they're just amazing.
Yeah, because they seem to be into English. They seem to be very connected to it. They seem to be very inside the English language and not studying it superficially. That's the impression I've got. Yeah, good readers are definitely very good at English.
Yeah. I mean, I had one guy, he was amazing. He was only like sort of B2.2 level, but he was reading everything in original version. And I thought that was really unusual, because he said he didn't want it watered down. He just wanted to have it, see it. And he knew that he didn't understand stuff, but he didn't want the actual language changed.
Mm-hmm. So Anna said, watered down. So you remember, you can get graded readers, which watered down means the level will be filtered so that the more difficult words are taken out, and you can get these graded readers that are graded or applied to whatever level your English is. So if you're B2, you get a B2 graded reader. If you're C1, you get a C1 graded reader.
I still think they're good.
Yeah, me too.
Because it can be it can really put you off. It can be a bit frustrating if you're reading and you don't understand things, and then you can feel less motivated. I don't think it's for everyone at all to read everything in the original version.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the good thing about graded readers, if you get one at just the right level, is the idea that it's a mixture of what you're familiar with and some new vocabulary and expressions and things.
And a lot of them come with a CD these days as well, or some sort of audio as well. So you can listen as well as read, which I also think is a good idea too, because you get the pronunciation as well, which I think is nice.
Yep. And the most important thing, I think, is make sure that you're reading or listening to something that interests you. Make sure that your genre, perhaps, of fiction is something you're interested in. If you like horror, then read a horror book in English. If your hobby is sailing, read a sailing blog or a magazine. Whatever you like doing, try to transfer that to English so that the content will be interesting to you.
Yeah, because I had a student just a couple of weeks ago, actually, who went with every good intention into the library and chose a Jane Austen novel. And he had it on his shelf, he said, for about the whole 2 weeks. And he kept picking it up, putting it down. He was like, I couldn't. And I said to him, no, if it's not your thing, it's not your cup of tea at all. You know, if it's not your cup of tea, then it's not your interest.
So if you were to read a fiction book, what would be your cup of tea in fiction?
Oh, you see, I do like Jane Austen. I would have, if that was in Spanish, I would have read it again and again because I really like it. I don't know it. I like things with characters, with a story. But if you're into science fiction or if you're into horror, then, that's what you should read, really.
What's your cup of tea for fiction?
For fiction, well, learning Spanish, I liked Gabriel Garcia Marquez.
Yeah,
His
me
books
too.
Yeah.
helped me to learn. Because there was a mixture of quite simple Spanish, but then strange South American terms, which I wasn't familiar with. And it got me using the dictionary and investigating a bit. I thought it was very interesting.
And also short stories, because sometimes, a novel's just too long, whereas a short story is a couple of pages. That can be easier as well.
Roald Dahl is very good for that.
Oh, yeah, fantastic.
We couldn't give you this list without mentioning podcasts, and of course, if you have an iPhone or an iPad, you have the native Apple Podcast app, which is now called Apple Podcasts. So just go in there and search for us, but also search for your hobby or pastime, and then listen to podcasts in English that speak about what you like to do in your free time, or maybe for work as well. That could be interesting for you. If you have an Android device, an Android phone or tablet, then you'd need a special application to access podcasts. So one we recommend is Stitcher, Stitcher, which is completely free. It's supported by advertisements. And so you download through the Google Play Store, you download Stitcher, search for your podcast, and then you can build up a playlist of your favorite podcasts for your phone.
Yeah, I think it's a really good idea, because I've got students as well who listen to their podcast on the way to work or on the way to college, and it really does improve their listening, I think. They seem very motivated by it.
Well, you've actually proven it does with that research you did at the British Council. Remember, you took the details of students' marks before they started listening to podcasts and after, and you found
I took half of the class were volunteers, and they listened in their spare time as extra homework to podcasts, and I tested them at the beginning of the course, at the end of the course, and the students who were listening to podcasts during the week scored much higher on their listening exam. So I'm completely confident 100% in saying that if you listen to podcasts during the week, your listening will definitely improve.
And also it's the fact of having it on in the background. Do you think you could be doing your ironing, you could be cleaning the house or whatever.
Walking the dog,
on the metro, whatever, and you could be
losing weight at the gym.
Yeah, whatever. You could be doing that, couldn't you?
I'll tell you something. The only reason I go to the gym is to listen to podcasts. It really helps me pass the time on the bicycle machine and the indoor walking machine. Is when I'm listening to podcasts, it makes it. I'm doing two things at once. I'm exercising, I'm improving my Spanish or learning something in English. So I definitely suggest taking your podcast with you on your phone to the gym.
Do you get faster on the machines when you're listening to your podcast?
No, music helps me get faster.
Right.
So if I really want to train hard or have a hard workout, a workout is a session in the gym, then I'd listen to music because that motivates me more. But if I'm just, doing something suave, something very gentle on the bicycle, I'd listen to a podcast, and it really helps pass the time.
Yeah, that's true.
Finally, number 8, we have online forums. Reza.
Well, an online forum is when you search on internet for people who are interested in the same thing as you. Could be anything, could be any hobby or interest, and it could be learning a language. And sometimes they go into incredible detail. I've done it for Spanish. I've looked for expressions which I couldn't find in dictionaries or anywhere else. And people will get into lengthy discussions about the details of certain expressions or collocations or nuances, subtle points. And I find it's particularly good for that type of thing. Really very, very specific or very subtle things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, especially if you're preparing for exam, as you're saying, that's really useful, isn't it?
Yeah.
And most people these days are on Facebook, and there's a Facebook group that I definitely recommend for FCE. It's called FCE First Certificate in English Preparing the B2 Exam. But if you search on Facebook for groups and just type in FCE, CAE, CPE, whatever, IELTS, whatever level you're studying for, you'll find groups of people that will help you with resources and information. And let's keep this a secret just between you and me. but they do share copies of listenings and books on these groups. So it's a really good way. If you can't afford to buy the textbook, don't tell anybody. If you can't afford the textbook, you can go to these groups and find out links of where to get it.
Wow. We are all connected after all. There seem to be like loads of members of these groups, don't there?
Well, this particular group that I like going into from time to time has over 17,000 members.
That's incredible, isn't it?
So that's a big community of people helping you to improve your English. Anything else on online forums?
I must say, it's not something that I really know a lot about, but I'm gonna look into it. Looks really interesting.
I don't have any really real go-to sites. I mean, for Spanish, it's just when I have a bit of difficulty with a translation or something, I just Google difference between or blah, blah, blah. And I like to go to forums, and that's where they generally really
true.
go
When you
into
do that, you see lots of answers and people have really got into it and they've made comments and corrected it. Yeah, that's true.
But it's not something I would follow regularly. I'm not a regular follower of a forum. That could be a bit tedious. It's just kind of,
it's just
specific things.
Dip into it.
Yeah, when you really need it.
Yeah.
Well, that's our 8 points to help you improve your English. We hope it's been useful for you. Thank you very much, Anna, for coming on the podcast as our special guest. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks very much,
Absolutely, Anna. For me too.
I know that you help students online. If people want to contact you and get in touch with you for help with their English, how can they reach you? Yeah,
they can just send me an email. My email address is annawright186 @aol.com. So Anna, ANNA, Wright, WRIGHT, 106 @aol.com.
And Anna's email will be in the show notes for this episode if you want to contact her. So go to inglespodcast.com/186. And if you want to get in touch with us, you can reach Reza at belfastreza@gmail.com.
Or you can get in touch with Craig at inglespodcast.com.
And if you want to send us a voice message that we absolutely prefer because we love hearing your voice, you can send us a voice message at speakpipe.com/inglespodcast. Do you keep a learner diary or would you like to know more about it? Do you have a favorite app, podcast or website that you use for self-study? Please let us know and send us a voice message to practice your speaking. Before we go, we'd like to quickly thank our Patreon sponsors. Who are they, Reza?
Thanks very much to Beatriz, Pedro, Maite, Lara, Rafa Banthels, Nestor García Mañez from nestorgm.com, Maria, Lorena, Sara, Carlos, Mamen, Juan Leva, Cory Finneran from IVNV, Miren, José Luis, Agus, Mariel Riedemann, Manuel García Betegón, Jorge, Raúl López, Rafael, Manuel Tarazona, and our new sponsors, José Manuel Fernández Picazo, beg your pardon, Juan Carlos, Pilar Martinez, who lives in France and manages to learn English despite all the opposition she must receive from the French, and Gambate Blog. Thank you very much to all of you.
Yeah, thanks so much for supporting the podcast. And remember, if you do join our Patreon program, you get transcripts every week from our recent podcasts and that free How to Pass a Job interview ebook and MP3. Also, a huge thank you to Patricia from Madrid, who recently transcribed episodes 8 and 9. And thanks to Arminda, Alberto, and Angelica for now that we can tell you we have transcriptions 131 to 142, all those episodes, and also episodes 1 to 9. Thanks, guys. What's next week, Reza?
On next week's episode, winter weather.
Winter is coming, as they say in Game of Thrones.
Maybe not here in Spain.
This is proper northern winter weather, not Mediterranean winter weather we'll be talking about.
So until next week, it's goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.